Ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tim Binnall.
No commercials, no subscriptions, no network, no rules. And at the end of the day, my friends, no comparison. Welcome to another edition of BOA The Revival. Very excited about tonight's program. We have a tremendous researcher whom we're going to speak with tonight, Maxim Furek. I had the great pleasure of meeting him in Baltimore pre-pandemic at the Fort Fest. And as I was joking with Max before we went on the air, it was just a whirlwind weekend put on by the Swiatek folks and a whole bunch of people down there who were part of that Fort Fest crew. So it was like the whole weekend was like a blur. And when I was booking Maxim, he was like, yeah, we met at Fort Fest. And I'm like, oh my God, I barely remember that weekend. It was just so crazy. Just so much going on that weekend in Fort Fest. But I remember his presentation on the Sheppton case, which we're going to get into in a moment. The Sheppton case, which is what he was talking about there. And as I was looking to book guests here going into the summer for Binnall of America, Max was kind of like at the top of my list because I had seen a lot of his stuff. I'd seen him around. He's doing a lot of podcasts lately, and he crossed through my periphery here, and I'm like, that's the guy, Sheppton from Fort Fest, and he's got all these other books that came out post-pandemic. We all got swept up in the pandemic, so it was like we were kind of finding each other now after like a shipwreck. So I'm like, I got to get Max Furek on the show. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, Max. Thank you so much for coming on Binnall of America.
Yeah, Tim, thanks so much. I'm really honored and pleased and excited to be on your program. I remember meeting you in, I guess it was 2018, 7 years ago, and your presentation was about the flat earth theory and just how popular that was. And you used a lot of Google algorithms to show that there was more excitement and interest in the flat earth theory than there was, say, Roswell or the Kennedy assassination or anything else that was out there. So that was pretty amazing. And that was a great presentation that you gave. And that was a great weekend too. And as we mentioned, a lot of good crab cakes there in Baltimore. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely.
So that was a good time. So well, thanks so much. And I see you're doing well with your podcast. So
yeah, it's going really well. So we generally start out with the first time guest, the bio, the background. You have a really fascinating, interesting background. You kind of came into this paranormal after an already amazing and fascinating career as a rock journalist. So tell us about your bio background. How did you get mixed up in all this, and how did you end up writing about high strangeness, if you will?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't buy any of that stuff that about my my background. I think everybody has a interesting resume, and if you talk to anybody, you'd find they've had their ups and downs and their successes and all that, and so have I. But I started off I was a psychologist, but I worked specifically in addictions, and I really sort of had a fascination and affinity for these new drugs of abuse, ketamine, Molly or ecstasy, the Rohypnol, Quaaludes. I mean, all the stuff that was out there that was, coming back in, the bath salts and synthetic cannabinoids and designer drugs and all that. So I started to write about this and research. And then as a rock and roll journalist, certainly there's that connection between sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So look at all these people that were getting caught up in the substances and self-destructing. So I was writing for a number of publications, recovery publications, and I coined the term celebrity blood voyeurism. Mm-hmm. And that's what I describe as society's pathological fixation on these celebrities that crash and burn, i.e. Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain, Lane Staley, Elvis Presley. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And there's been so many of them. And, so I was lecturing about that and writing about that. But the thing that brought you and I together was the Sheppton Mining Disaster of 1963. So I was writing this book, and again, this was a pandemic project, actually. But when the walls were closing in and everybody was going crazy, we had to find something to do. So this book, somebody else's dream, was my therapy during the pandemic. And what was doing was, there was a song called Timothy. And Timothy was released in 1971. It was about 3 guys that went into a mine and only 2 came out, and there were allegations of cannibalism. Yeah. Well, the song Timothy from 71 paralleled what happened in Sheppton, Pennsylvania in 1963. 3 dudes went down into the mine. 2 weeks later, only 2 came out, and the neighbors wanted to know what happened to your buddies. And immediately, because we confabulate, we conjecture. The human mind has to fill in the blanks, and one of them in this case was cannibalism. And the townspeople, a bunch of the townspeople back then and even now, believe that the missing miner, Louis Bova, was cannibalized by his other mates. So when the Chicago Daily News asked Dave Fellon, one of the miners, if he cannibalized his mate, he said only evil people would ask such a question, because he said that he didn't do it. So that was the story. But so when I was researching Sheppton, there was also not just cannibalism, but there were other paranormal aspects, including out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, and afterlife experiences. And that afterlife experience pertained to Pope John the 23rd. And this is kind of crazy because Pope Francis just died. Pope Francis canonized Pope John the 23rd in 2014. But the miners claimed, they swore that Pope John the 23rd saved their lives, that he was down in the mine with them the entire 2 weeks, didn't say anything. He just stood there over in the corner. But he had died. Pope John the 23rd died in June of 63. Sheppton took place in August of 63. Tim, and all 3 of the purported miracles of Pope John the 23rd all happened after he had died. So, I've spoken with Catholic, priests and brothers and sisters and asked them about it. And to a person, they always all said that Pope John the 23rd died, went to heaven, got his power, and then he came down and he worked those miracles. So, if you believe that, that's how it works. But one other interesting thing, when Pope Francis canonized Pope John the 23rd, it was a dual canonization. It was 2014. So Pope John the 23rd was the first one. The second one was Pope John Paul II. He was an exorcist. And he convened a school of exorcism, invited priests from 132 different countries to come there to learn the ancient medieval art of the rite of exorcism, because Pope John Paul II believed that evil exists and the devil exists, and the devil wants us all to think it's just a cartoon, a fantasy, a mechanism that the church would use to scare us. If you don't go to church, the devil's going to get you. So But Pope John Paul II believed that evil exists, and he was teaching these priests how to do an exorcism. So that was kind of interesting how this all came together. Again, I wasn't looking for the paranormal. It found me. I was writing a book about rock and roll. And then all of a sudden, I'm invited to Baltimore. Think about it. The book came out in 2016. I'm invited, to Baltimore, to the Fort Fest. I've been on, podcasts, just a whole lot of things. So the doors opened, and that's pretty much my story. I've been doing this for 9 years, and I've published a number of books, and I'm starting to get a tiny little name recognition. We were in Ocala, Florida at the Bigfoot Expo, and a number of people came up and said, "Hey, I've heard you on these podcasts." And, the one was Bigfoot Crossing that comes from Tulsa, Oklahoma. You wouldn't know how many people actually listened to that one, but this guy came up and said, "Yeah, I heard you on there," and there were a couple other ones. So that's kind of nice. It's a wonderful feeling, and especially when people read your books and they like it and they comment on that, because that's a good thing.
Yeah, I know. It's gratifying. It's like I kind of get the same way when I hear from people who listen to the shows or read the stuff at Coast to Coast. It's always nice that, oh, good, I'm not just shouting out the window here.
Exactly. Yeah. Right? Well, a lot of us, I think a lot of us, we sort of operate in a vacuum. And we think we do, but we don't realize that we're touching people, we're connecting with people, and making a difference. And that's a good thing. But it's happening out there with both of us, and it's kind of neat. Yeah.
So you were writing about these addictive drugs and everything, and their influence on sort of celebrity culture. But what connected you to look into Sheppton? Is this like, I think you're from the Pennsylvania area, I take it, right? Because your stuff's from Pennsylvania based. So was it something that you had known about like growing up, or had heard about that kind of you wanted to write? Like what really, because I had never, until you and I crossed paths, I had never even heard of this Sheppton case.
Yeah, it's a pretty obscure thing. I mean, which is bizarre, because one of the anomalies about Sheppton, and Sheppton is just a whole lot of weirdness, a whole lot of elements of high strangeness. But one of them is that the rescue technology that they developed in Sheppton in 1963, they later used in 2010 at the Chilean copper mine disaster. Remember, there was a movie called The 33. Yeah. Sheppton technology saved those 33 dudes. The world doesn't know that. I try to spread the word, and because this is something that we're proud of, from back home, but nobody knows about that. I was trying to write this book about the connection between the song Timothy and the actual Sheppton mine disaster. That was the connection. And as I was researching Sheppton, I found out there's all these paranormal elements, these paranormal aspects that were just ingrained in Sheppton. They saw humanoid creatures. They saw, the dead Pope John the 23rd. I mean, they believed that they had out-of-body experiences where they rose up above through the mine shaft and were able to look down, not once but twice, on the rescue team. And there were thousands of people here. This was a big story in 1963, surpassed only by the assassination of John Kennedy in November of 63. So this took place in August, and the miners were able to had an out-of-body experience, and they were able to look down and see those thousands of people, the National Guard, the military, the Salvation Army, the paparazzi, and the rubberneckers. I mean, tons and tons and tons of people that were there. And also the hoaxers, the fakers, like the one guy that was walking around claiming that he was a doctor, and he was passing out energy bars, and just a whole lot of bizarre things like that. People that took advantage of the situation to go and revel in their I don't know, their notoriety, their sudden glow of fame. I don't know, but you had that. You had that too.
You always get some, yeah. So take me through. We don't necessarily have to go through the whole story, people. So I'm going to kind of mentally walk through. So they're these three miners. They're down there, and there's like a cave in. So then they're stuck in like a pocket, essentially, or the wherever the back end of the mine that would go forward.
Yeah, what they were, they were pillar robbers, and so the mining companies would go in there and work the mines, and they would be depleted and they would leave. A lot of times these independent miners would be able to lease those vacated mines, and they would go in the back where they had these pillars of coal, and they would start in the back and extricate all that coal and then go to the next one. You got to be very delicate about this, because if you screw up, it's going to be a mine cave in. So what they did with Sheppton, it was on a Tuesday morning. They went down into the mine. They loaded the first buggy. They sent it up to George Walker, who was the guy at the top. And then he emptied it and sent it back down. And as it was going back down, that's when the collapse happened. And it was all because they had robbed the pillars, and the whole structure had been weakened. It collapsed. And so it was like like Armageddon, just like everything just exploded with, this with all the coal and rock and timber and everything. So they jumped to one side. Louis Bova, they claimed, jumped to the other side, and they claimed that they were separated by a mountain of this debris, that they never were in contact with Louis Bova, the mine that allegedly was cannibalized. And that makes sense to me. But again, that story has never gone away. And even Louis Bova's son, Johnny Bova, believes that they ate his dad. And every time they interview him, every time the anniversary of Sheppton comes up, Johnny has to go and say, I believe they might have eaten my dad. I mean, Johnny can't let it go. So it's too bad.
Well, it reminds me, it's funny because as I was reading about the Sheppton thing, and I wonder how much, if this has even informed the show at all, but there's a TV show called Yellow Jackets where it's like a girls' soccer team that crashes in the Canadian wilderness, and they turn to cannibalism.
Yep.
On the show. I don't know if you've seen the show or not or heard about this, but
I've heard about the show. Yeah.
Yeah. So then they get rescued and they come back and they're forever sort of haunted by the speculation. They never admit that they did cannibalism because on the show, it's like this ritualistic. They don't eat because they have to. They eat because they went out of their minds and became like a feral tribe of people or whatever. And, when they come home, they always people are always like whispering and shit, like, "Oh, I heard they ate some of them out there and everything." Yeah. So it's like, okay, that's like the Sheppton thing,
like in Sheppton, yeah. But one other thing I want to say this, since you insist on talking about cannibalism, in the Chilean copper mine disaster of 2010, there was a movie called The 33, and then there were at least 2 books that were written about this. So get this, 33 guys, they had rations. They had a little tin of tuna fish. They had some crackers and they had some milk. That was the rations per person per day. And they knew that at a certain point, the food rations were going to kick. So in these books, they said, we might have to resort to cannibalism. So 32 of the guys were from Chile. The 33rd guy was from Uruguay. So the way this went was that if anybody was cannibalized, it'd be the guy from Uruguay. So that was the dark humor. But luckily, they were able to drill down and get them. But it's pretty amazing, though, what people do. And in the Sheppton book, I tried to write this through a psychological lens. I mean, what would it be like to be down there in pitch darkness?
Yes, that's what
with crawling on your hands and knees. I mean, your bloodied hands and knees, sucking in the dirt and the coal particles. And the worst thing being that there's no promise, there's no expectation of being rescued. That was
no knowledge either of any. No knowledge of what, if it's, you know what I mean? Like they have no idea if they're trying to find you.
So you're in a state where you're adrenalized and I mean, just filled with this fear. They had this mantra. They would dig, tap, and pray. And they would try to dig their way out. They had some shovels. They would tap to try to notify the rescuers that they were there. And then they would pray. And I believe my theory is that through this mantra, this dig, tap, pray, that they were able to go and get into this meditative state where they actually had this out-of-body experience. Now, in Coleridge and Hoodoo, I pursue that further. St. Teresa of Avila was the 17th century Spanish mystic. And she claimed that through prayer and meditation, a person can get through to different states of rapture, ecstasy, and flight of the soul. And the flight of the soul is an out-of-body experience. So, I mean, it's certainly a possibility. And let's face it, in the realm of the paranormal, we're just looking for possibilities. We're looking for theories. And that's the best that we can do. Just like J. Allen Hynek, put some labels on things until another label, is more suitable. So, but anyway, that was, Sheppton was just a bizarre coal mining incident that took in so much others, the cannibalism and the miraculous and the technological thing. I mean, what they did was, some of the rescue techniques were brand new, and the old and with old coal mining disasters. They weren't able to go down into the mine because that would be all filled with debris and everything.
Right.
Typically, they would just bulldoze the site, pave it over, call the Catholic priest, do the last rites of absolution, and that would it. They would, it was too dangerous and too expensive. So they would just die there. I mean, like, they rarely would go down and try to rescue them. With the Sheppton thing, there were family members that insisted that they go and try to rescue the bodies, and so that's when they came up with some innovative borehole techniques and all that. Howard Hughes, the Texas billionaire, was one of the guys that sent up the tungsten drill bits, to help drill through those 330 feet of rock and coal. So he was in there.
So, okay, I got two questions. First, can you paint a picture? Because you threw me a little bit because I was trying to put myself in this position. And then I'm like, oh, now I'm really confused because you said they're crawling around. How much space did these guys, so they couldn't even stand up? Like, how much space did they have in the little pocket that they were in for how long? 2 weeks, right? You say?
2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. Yeah.
So how big was this pocket?
Well, first of all, the coal mine kept on having what was called rushes, and those were other crashes, other like almost earthquakes within the cave mine.
Settling. It's like settling.
It was settling, correct, yeah, and it was pretty dramatic. So there were places where they had to crawl like dogs. There were other places where they could go and stand up. They believed there were different areas. They believed that maybe the main area might have been as wide or as large as a football field.
Oh, wow.
But again, in my book on Sheppton, I describe 5 different descriptions of what their environment was, what they had to deal with. But again, the one interesting thing, Dave Fallon was 58 years old. He was the older guy there. And he kind of knew how long it would take the rescue team to go down 330 feet. And they were taking their time, and he was pissed off. And when he was finally rescued, he mouthed off. And he said that, they should have got here faster. And for a while there, this guy that should have been thankful and grateful that they rescued him, he was complaining, and he was the pariah for a while. So, he needed to back off on his words and, find something else.
So the second question was so they must not have, so it caves in. So we're not on a video, people can't see, but I'm sort of doing this with my hand. So it caves in sort of the mine part. So they have to then bore down from above, essentially, and make a new well, if you will, because it's going to be a straight down shot to get to them where they think they might be, right? Because it's hard to probably even gather where they are in the mine shaft.
Yeah. And so that was kind of bizarre too. So they had this drill. So they thought that, okay, if there were any place, they might be in what was called a monkey shaft. And that was a place where they would keep food and tools and everything. They were little cubby holes.
Right.
And so they thought that, okay, if they're any place, if they're alive, they would be here. So they're driving this drill, this rig towards this X, and it breaks down. So instead of drilling there where the X was, they drill before that, quite a ways before that, and they were able to reach them. So this was just one of those. It was a real bizarre anomaly. I think it smacks of the paranormal because it certainly didn't make any sense. But they
feels like divine intervention.
Exactly. Yeah.
You and I may get scoffed at by some people, but I think we can agree that's fucking divine.
Absolutely.
Intervention.
Yeah.
The thing broke down at the spot where they needed to go instead of the spot they were going to go. I mean, how else?
Yeah.
Come on.
So another thing that happened too, they rescue these guys. So they bring up Hank Throne. He was 28 years old. He was a young guy. And it took him twice as long to go up through this borehole with a helmet. And he was just hysterical. He couldn't handle it. So he came out there. And then they brought up Davy Fallon. Each of them went over to the Hazleton General Hospital in a helicopter, 2 different helicopters. So as soon as they got there, there was a picture. This was a pretty Catholic area, and there was a picture of Pope John the 23rd on the wall. And Hank Throne, who was agnostic. He was just like a party guy. He was just like he liked to chase women and drink beer. And he sees the picture. He goes, Davey, that's the guy. That's the fellow we saw down there. Look. And Davy Fallon knew what Pope John the 23rd looked like because he was a devout Catholic, but not Hank Throne. Hank Throne didn't go to church. He didn't care about this stuff. But there was this picture, this photograph in the hospital, and Hank Throne said, there he is. That's the guy we saw down there. I mean, like, that was pretty profound.
That's wild.
Yeah. The other thing, too, that happened was before they got rescued, Davy Fallon told Throne, the younger Throne, keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anybody what we saw down here. They're going to think we're crazy. And as soon as Hank Throne was up there, you had these paparazzis back there in 1963. And all the questions were the same. What was it like to be down there? Did you ever feel that you would be rescued? All this stuff. And he just started to blab and blab. He had no self-control. And he talked about seeing the Pope, the stranger, and about
So the guy who told the kid not to say anything is actually the one who couldn't shut up about it.
Well, no. The younger guy did.
Okay. So
it was the younger guy, not the older guy. Yeah, he didn't. Right. He didn't take. Follow those messages very well. So, but anyway, it remains a really big thing around here. I've talked to somebody. There's a possibility of making a documentary about the Sheppton mythology, and I've been talking to this producer who does New York City based programs, and we're in the talking stages now. But she thinks that we could go and put something together and take it around to some of the film festivals, because it's just like has a lot of different elements, a lot of moving parts. And so we'll see. But a lot of things have to fall in line in order for that to happen. But that would be great. And
now, I take it neither of these guys are alive. They've passed away.
They all passed away. I was not able to talk to any of them. I did talk to Louis Bova's son, who believes that his daddy was cannibalized. I did talk to Dave Fallon's niece. I did talk to one guy, and he said I interviewed him, but he wanted to remain anonymous. And that was because he was a business person, and he had a business relationship with Dave Fallon. And I asked this guy, I said, well, are the stories true? And he said that I asked Davy Fallon about this. He goes, Davy, what's the story about the cannibalism and about all this stuff? What was true, what is pretty profound, is that they saw these stairwells, ostensibly going up to heaven, but their relatives, their family members, and ancestors, that they never saw, but they knew that their ancestors were sitting there on these steps. And it was almost like a sign that they were going to be rescued. Some people believe that the Pope being down there was a sign that they were going to be rescued. And there were just a lot of other just weird stuff that,
well, I got it's I'm on the edge of my seat here. Well, of course you're going to live. If the Pope comes down to see you, you're going to live, because why else would the Pope show up? You're supposed to come out and tell everyone you saw the Pope. That's the whole point. If you die, the Pope's like, oh shit. All right, well, come on, let's go. We're leaving. So now I think I know the answer to this question based upon how the mythology unfolded. But so they pull these two guys out. Did they say, and they're like, okay, where's the third guy? Yep. And they're like, oh, he's in the other pocket, whatever. Okay, so they didn't try to look for this guy. Did they send anyone down after the fact? I feel like it's, okay, this is dangerous, right? So maybe not, but it's like, okay, you pulled these two guys out. Did they send anyone back down in there with like lights and shit to look for any sign of this dude?
Yeah, they sent... This is kind of interesting too. Yeah, his name was Mr. X, believe it or not. And here it was Mr. X. It was the president of the Independent Miners Association. So he volunteered to go after they were rescued. He volunteered to go back down into the shaft to see what was there, to see if he could find the body. But he didn't want his wife to know. He thought that she would go and get hysterical. So they just called him Mr. X. They drove up in this truck. There was a tarp. They covered the thing. Nobody could see him sneak in. So he went down there, looked around, and there was nothing there. There was a helmet. they had sent a camera down there, and it looked like there might have been a person there, but what it was I believe a shovel with a helmet on top of it. That's what it was.
Okay.
And it looked like a person, but there was nobody there. And, and my belief is that they never cannibalized him, that they were separated by a mountain of coal, that came down. The other thing too is, you got to wonder about the hunger when you're in a place where it's maybe 52, 53 degrees constant, and you're suffering from hypothermia and all this other stuff. I mean, I think food is the last thing on your mind. I think that you're just adrenalized. Yeah. And, you're just, there was sulfur water there. They were able to drink sulfur water and maybe chew on some timbers, but there wasn't anything else. There was no food in the monkey shaft and all that. So,
you wonder though too. It's like, I agree with you, I think, but at the same time, I start to wonder you were talking 2 weeks. I start to wonder where I'd be by day 8. I feel like I'd be getting used to it and getting very, I'm like that older guy they pulled up. Yeah. Getting very annoyed. I'd be like, this is
after that book came out in 2016, I realized that I had an audience. I had a demographic that, that I tapped into something. So I wrote a book called Coal Region Hoodoo: Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit. And what I did with that is I tried to take, and this was, I had to think about this, but I took aspects of spirituality and the paranormal and brought them closer to the scientific realm. Yeah. And and I did talk again about Pope John the 23rd and about St. Teresa of Avila and about some of the exorcists. And, it's funny because when I get interviewed them, they say, well, what do you like better? Do you like flying saucers or do you like Bigfoot? And the thing that really gets me, cranks me up is what I call Catholic mysticism. And I like talking about miracles and apparitions and demons. I was friends with Ed and Lorraine Warren. I had met them in 1988 when they were on a 15-city book tour for a book called The Haunted. Yeah. And they were here in northeastern Pennsylvania investigating the Schmerl haunting. And our Schmerl haunting was our equivalent to Amityville. I mean, a truthful one. So, but it was your typical demonic house with the horrible smells, the grunting sounds, the profanities etched in the mirror. A Jack Schmerl claiming that he was raped by a female demon, the succubus, Jesus. And also the collie being levitated and thrown across the room.
The dog.
Yeah, the dog. Yeah, but with that, one thing I think that might have been the young daughter, the Schmerl daughter, Dawn. And, Stephen King made a career out of the kinetic, psychokinetic energies, especially from young people like Carrie and Firestarter and The Shining and all this, these young children with abilities. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that maybe, again, this is just a theory, that Dawn, with all the things that was happening, that this Schmerl girl somehow levitated that collie and flung it across the room. But
Jesus.
But I mean, whether you believe that part or not, the Schmerls went to the Catholic Church. They started to send priests over there. This priest would spend the night there. Every Catholic diocese has an exorcist. He's somebody who is schooled in the art of exorcism. Yeah. They started to send the exorcist there, and they couldn't do anything. They called for another one, couldn't do anything. Finally, they got this guy from New York State, this Father Treebolt, and it took him 4 times to go and do the cleansing, the rite of exorcism, before he was able to go and actually cleanse the house. But what's interesting about Father Treebolt is this. He was up in New York State trying to cleanse this house that was infested by demons. Yeah. And he couldn't get the job done. He told the people, just take your belongings, get out of the house. Don't say anything. Don't say where you're going to go. Just go. And Father Treebolt said, there's some places that are just evil. They're cursed. You stay away from them. You can't cleanse them. Even, even I can't do that using the
Really?
right of exit. Yeah, right. So
What became of the house?
I have no idea. This is what he wrote when he was interviewed, and I don't know if it was the Hinsdale House in New York. I think that might have been the one, but he was just saying that it's evil. Stay away.
Wild.
I mean, what could you burn it down? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's part of me's wondering if it's some kind of attraction now or something. These things happen.
Well, they say that they talk about attachments. They say that demons attach themselves to either people or to houses, property. So who knows? I mean, I don't. Maybe it was an old Indian burial ground. Maybe they killed a person, blamed somebody for being a witch. I mean, who knows?
Who knows? Anything. Yeah. Any kind of bad energy can attach itself.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was.
Well, you have a fascinating sort of trajectory. I was looking. Actually, hold on. I want to pause. I want to back up.
Yeah.
Timothy, this song.
Yeah.
It was banned on the radio because it dealt with candle. Tell me about this, because as a Timothy, I feel like I have to ask.
Yeah.
And
So Timothy,
I've never heard of a song being banned like.
Absolutely. Yeah. 1968. Mayor Daley of Chicago during the riots in Chicago banned "Street Fighting Man" by the Stones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, there's been a whole lot of songs that have been banned.
That's probably true. Yeah.
But Timothy was released in 1971. I was going to school in Oklahoma, Pottawatomie County. It was a small Catholic school. I mean, just maybe under 1,000 kids there.
Yeah.
And it was a real party school. But anyway, I hear this song, Timothy, and here the guys that did it were called the Boys, Buoys. They were from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And these were our hometown heroes.
Local boys.
Yeah, exactly. So I was really skied about that, and I was, it was in me to write a book about the Boys and Timothy and their connection to Sheppton. And again, like I said, during the pandemic, somebody else's dream was that book, and that was in the making for a long time. Great book.
And
great
the song
movie.
is essentially it's like a Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald version of the Sheppton.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the guy that did it was Rupert Holmes, the Pina Colada Man. Rupert wrote it, and he was working at Scepter Studios in New York City. He was trying to create some notoriety for the Boys. And what happened was he wanted to do something controversial. What happened was that sort of backfired because the song got all the notoriety, not the Boys. The song is all listed with Dr. Demento and everybody else. It's always
really?
Listed as one of the yuckiest songs.
Okay. Yeah. Well, when I said earlier that I never heard of a song being banned, I should have continued that thought with a song about cannibalism, because I've never even. First of all, I don't even know any songs about cannibalism, and then it's like, okay, they banned it. Where was it banned?
Okay, the biggest one is probably WABC in New York, and they claimed that if they would have played it, if they would have put it on a regular rotation, that they probably would have sold another 1.5 million copies of the song. As it turned out, they're not exact. Rupert Holmes and the Boys aren't sure how many copies they sold because, these were the days where, the bookkeeping was suspect. And so they're not sure how many sides were sold, and so that was just part and parcel of the thing. And and the whole rock and roll industry was just so corrupt. Like, for example, if you look at a 45 of Chuck Berry's Maybelline, songwriters will be Chuck Berry and Alan Freed. Well, Alan Freed didn't write anything with that song. He played it. So it was pay for play. So because he played it, he somehow was able to get his name on the record. And that was and then he was getting royalties from that. So, that was just one of the horrible things that happened in the early days of rock and roll, and maybe even today, who knows? And, artists getting exploited either at the bottom or at the top. It's nothing new there.
Yeah. Well, to that end, in a sense, I was going to say, because now it's like you can listen to all this music for free, like on the internet, pretty much, and I can't imagine how they make any money off of this.
I know.
I guess you could find Timothy. You could probably go on YouTube right now and look it up, and it's on there. So when we get off the air, I'm gonna go check out this song.
Yeah, check that out. Yeah, and the song did well. It went up to, I think, number 13 on Billboard. And again, people listened to it and they liked the beat and everything. And then they started to listen to the lyrics. And then that yuck factor came in. Did you hear the song? Like, God, what did we do? You know, I mean, so
interesting. I got to hear this song.
Yeah, trapped in the mine, no food to eat. You know.
Oh God, let's eat Timothy.
Yeah, Timothy. So anyway, so the yuck factor drove it. I think a lot of college kids did, and so that was just that. But I mean, controversy sells, and even with Louie Louie, by the Kingsmen and everybody else that did that song. I mean, college kids would go and change the lyrics, and they would make them a little bit risque, and so the FCC, I forget, the governor of Indiana banned that song. That's right. That's another one that was banned.
Oh, so wow, interesting.
Yeah, so it's just pretty amazing, and so
wild.
So that's that. Yeah, Timothy.
Interesting, Timothy. Yeah. So where I was going before we reversed to Timothy was you've had an interesting career trajectory here. So you first get into the Sheppton case, which has its weird elements, obviously, but it's rooted in a real event that happened. And then you get into Coal Region Hoodoo and then you can see the transition starting to happen here. Then it's flying saucer esoteric. So you really jumped into this now, altered states of ufology. We're going to skip ahead a little bit because then the next one was the lost tribes of Bigfoot, which I'm a huge Bigfoot buff. Okay. I'm a Bigfoot aficionado.
Good.
I'm going to hunt for Bigfoot actually on Halloween this year. I'll be in the woods of North Georgia with Steve Berg and Josh Cutchin looking for fucking Bigfoot.
With Josh. Okay, cool.
That's how deeply invested I am in this creature. So so to that end, what got you into Bigfoot?
Well, in Coal Region Hoodoo, I had 2 chapters on, and Coal Region Hoodoo is a wonderful book. I mean, just jump on Amazon and read what, all the reviews. I mean, there's been a ton of reviews, but it's been really received in a positive manner. So in Coal Region Hoodoo, I had 2 chapters on Bigfoot, the Bigfoot Enigma and the Bigfoot Hypotheses. And I was just trying to figure out what's Bigfoot, what are the theories, how could I put this together just in 2 chapters? And I really couldn't. It was just a tease. It was just I just skimmed the surface. So I wanted to go and put together a document, a book, and to go deeper, to take a deeper dive into Sasquatchery. So I dedicated the book to the 4 horsemen of Sasquatchery, and it was published by Hangar One. They're the guys that do Monster Quest, Doug and Alex Hychek. And I called it The Lost Tribes of Bigfoot because there's a lot of theories about what Bigfoot could be. And those are my metaphorical tribes. It could be Neanderthal. It could be Australopithecus. It could be Gigantopithecus, that big orangutan-like creature that came over the Bering Strait and that may or may not be up in the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia. Neanderthal, the so-called missing link, and all the rest. So there's people like some like Jeff Meldrum from Idaho who believes that it might have been Gigantopithecus, and so then there's some theories there, but they're only theories. Yeah. And I wanted to approach this book like an academic, not as there's a lot of guys that are into the flesh and blood. My premise is this, Tim: if it's not flesh and blood, what is it? So I look at the other theories.
That's what I was going to say. When you were going down those things, I was waiting to see. I'm like, all right, are you going to get into the supernatural part?
Yeah, pretty much. The one that makes sense to me is the interdimensional theory. I think that Bigfoot and also UFOs may zigzag. They may shapeshift from one dimension to another. I think that Bigfoot creatures have some sort of psychic abilities. And it was Rosemary Ellen Guiley who talked about the bilocation and the rapid transport. You see Bigfoot and then you don't. She believed that they could transport from the material and tangible to the intangible. So there's people that claim that Bigfoot speaks through a telepathic means. The smell, a lot of people talk about the smell. One theory is that the reason that we can smell Bigfoot is because they're coming in through another dimension.
Oh, so it's like, okay, so like yeah,
it's like a potato bin or whatever,
Yeah, that gets Bigfoot off the hook. It's like, no, Bigfoot doesn't smell. It's the portal. It's the portal that smells. Everybody be nice to Bigfoot. Yeah, I like that.
In my book, I talk about Albert Ostman, and that was from 1924, and he was a Swedish-Canadian trapper. Mm-hmm. Somebody was messing with his campsite. They were stealing things, mucking it up, leaving prints. So Ostman was going to play a trick. He hid himself in the sleeping bag with a rifle, and when the culprit came, he was going to jump out and shoot him. Well, what happens was he fell asleep, and something carried him for what might have been miles and laid him down in this valley. Here it was a family of Sasquatch. Now, this is in 1924. Yeah. So they looked at him. The female, there was, say, a mother, father, son, and daughter, Sasquatch family. The daughter looked at Albert Ostman and fed him sweet grass. And everybody was curious. There was no signs of danger. There was no smell.
Wow,
in most Bigfoot encounters, there's some sort of a smell, either like a wet dog or a fecal matter, just a pungent thing, rotten eggs. The name Sasquatch means smelly ape up in British Columbia. But anyway, at some point, Ostman thought that they were going to go and try to rape him, the female.
Yeah.
So he had to bolt. So he had some chewing tobacco. He was able to entice the older Sasquatch to eat that. He got sick, and Ostman took off and didn't say anything. This was 1924. And then there started to be some accounts of the sightings of Bigfoot, this creature there in British Columbia. So Ostman hooked up with John Green, and John Green was a British Columbia journalist. He was one of the original members of one of the Four Horsemen of Sasquatchery, and he took his account, and he believed that what Albert Ostman said was accurate. But what's interesting was that, first of all, Ostman didn't talk about any kind of a smell. Everybody else does. He talked about a family of Sasquatch. Most people that are witnesses just talk about one, just saying one.
Right, yeah, the whole family thing's just...
Yeah, pretty bizarre. But this happened in 1924 before we had computers and microfiche and all the other stuff. Albert Ostman didn't have the luxury of going to a library or going to his computer and finding out what Bigfoot is all about. I mean, any one of us can do that, to describe it and all this other stuff. He didn't have that luxury. And so John Green believed that the story that he was telling was the truth. And he was able to describe what they look like, their mannerisms, etc. I believe that this was a true account. It's the only account of an abduction by a Bigfoot, as opposed to, that was 1924, 1961, what was it, Betty and Barney Hill, going through the White Hills of New Hampshire, claimed that they had missing time and that they were taken aboard a craft and probed and all that. And that kicked off a major cottage industry. I mean, a lot of people said, hey, I was abducted too, and I was probed. And then you had John Mack from Harvard and
the whole new field of the
it just opened up. It just so it didn't happen with Bigfoot, but it happened with UFOs. So that was kind of an interesting thing. That was 1924, and that was 1961. Same thing.
When did he come forward? I'm sure you said this, but I'm trying to keep up as best I can. When he happened in 24? When did he come out and say?
I believe it was a couple years later. It was after.
Oh, okay. So it's 1926.
Yeah, so
so not like later on when the Bigfoot really became a thing. He didn't just show up like.
He really wasn't looking for any kind of notoriety.
All right, that makes the story a little bit more, because I thought maybe like it happened to him in 24, and then when the Bigfoot craze kicked off, like in the 50s, he like popped up and was like, "Hey, remember me?" And then was like, "Oh wait, So all right, interesting. All right,
The only incident where something like that happened was the Patterson-Gimlin film. And in 1967, when they shot that film of Patty in Northern California, Patterson was the one. Roger Patterson went out there and wanted to exploit this and make money. And, he did that with his brother-in-law. Bob Gimlin didn't. Bob Gimlin took off and he spent his 40 days in the desert and nights in the desert. He was pretty much undercover. And then they started to have these Bigfoot conventions, and they would invite him. And he was like the god. He was the Messiah. Bob Gimlin, he was the man who saw Bigfoot, that 58-second video. So, but he was very reluctant to do this. He wasn't looking for any kind of notoriety. Just amazing how that turned out. Gimlin is I think 87 years old right now.
I think he's still around. Yeah, he's
still around. Yeah.
I should try and get him on Binnall America. That would be fun.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah. I was going to ask you about the Patterson-Gimlin film. So you take that it's a legitimate thing.
Yeah, I think the film's the holy grail. I think it's the best thing we have, and that's equivalent to the 2004 Tic Tac video off the coast of San Diego. The USS Nimitz, where they saw this thing that hovered, zigzagged, and then it went underwater, and that's pretty legitimate. But I want to say this about the Patterson-Gimlin film and its authenticity. There was a guy named John Napier. He was a British primatologist, and he was working at the Smithsonian. They were able to get a copy of this, and they looked at it, and Napier said, no, it's a hoax. And he said the reason it's a hoax is because the upper part of Patty, the Bigfoot in the Patterson-Gimlin film, the upper part looks too ape-like, and the bottom part looks like a hominid. And he said because he thought that maybe Patterson and Gimlin just cobbled those two elements together. So that was in 1972. In 1974, they discovered Australopithecus. That was in Ethiopia. And these researchers, they named it Lucy after what famous song for 10 points, Tim Binnall? You're on.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds? I don't know.
You got it. You get 10 points. Okay, very good. So they named it after Lucy. So that night, those researchers got drunk and played Beatles. But when John Napier heard about this, he changed his mind. Remember, in 72, he said it was a hoax. But in 74, here, Lucy had the upper arms of an ape that climbed trees and everything, and the bottom like a bipedal hominid. So here was an example of science catching up with the theory, and John Napier became another convert, to the Patterson-Gimlin film, which, again, it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's our holy grail. It's the best thing we have.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I recently saw someone lamenting, sort of a skeptic lamenting that it was you couldn't debunk it because everything seemed to align perfectly. The lighting was perfect, and the timing of it, the angle, and everything else. And it's like there's just everything came together in such a perfect way that it's just like too good to be true. And it's like, or it's just fucking true. Or it's just like, what are the odds? Like everything aligned perfectly, man. Like the light,
but even let's just say that. Let's say that me and you were going to put on this hoax. Okay, so we designed this monkey suit. We had a guy there, a big guy to walk on it, and he had the stride down and everything. If we were going to shoot this video, it would be a lot more than 58 seconds. I mean, I'd give him 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Come on, But this was only 58 seconds. There. And they didn't even know they had any footage because they went around the bend and saw Patty, and the horses buckled and they bolted, and Patterson is shooting as he's falling off the horse, and Gimlin was holding his horse on the pack horse. So, it was just like kind of crazy. And then Patty turns around and looks at Patterson and takes off. And some people believe that there were little Bigfoot creatures there that Patty was just running off as a diversion, just to keep people.
Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that was one theory, but who knows?
Yeah. It's the greatest paranormal film ever made. It should get an Oscar. They should get some kind of honorary Oscar for short film for the fucking Patterson-Gimlin film. That's one of the greatest movies.
And it's the equivalent to the Zapruder film. It's the paranormal's equivalent to the Zapruder film.
Yes, but much more pleasant.
Yeah.
Now you call out the hoaxers in the book. I heard you have a real
I do. Yeah, well,
hard time with the hoaxers. I don't blame you. They're it's getting worse and worse now with the AI and all that shit. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, no, I hate that. And these are people that are looking for their 15 minutes of fame, whatever. I mean, some of them make money from it, but I have 3 chapters calling out the hoaxers. I claim that they've sold their souls to the devil. One was the Piltdown Man, and that was Charles Dawson. He was a lawyer and a amateur fossil collector. And what he did was, there was a rivalry going on with Germany. Germany had their Heidelberg Man, which was an ancient relic, so Great Britain wanted to have theirs. So Charles Dawson came up with this Piltdown Man. And in the end, here what it was an old skull coupled with an orangutan jaw, and Dawson filed down the teeth on the orangutan to make it look more human-like, and then peppered it with iron oxide to make everything look like it was a lot older. So it took something like 40 years before he was called out and discredited. But a lot of the members of the scientific community and the politicians wanted to have their own Piltdown Man that was older and had a bigger brain than Heidelberg Man and all this. So you had that nationalism going too. So that was one of the things that made this hoax possible. The other one was the Minnesota Iceman, and there was a carny, this Frank D. Hansen, and he claimed a whole lot of things. He claimed that he was able to purchase this body, this relic, this Minnesota Iceman that was floating in a like a little glacier off of Siberia. And then another version was that he got it in Japan, and he just kept on changing his story. But what the thing that was embarrassing for us for cryptozoology was that Ivan T. Sanderson and Bernard Helvemans, and these are Sanderson coined the term cryptozoology.
Yeah, these are like the titans of the.
Yeah. And Helvemans was the father of cryptozoology, but they were conned. They believed that it was the actual thing, and what they did was they were able to go and look at this body and smell the stench. We were talking about Bigfoot stench. They could smell the stench, so they thought this was the Minnesota Iceman actually decomposing. And then this one disappeared, and then Frank Hansen had another rubberized suit. So he kept on moving the goalpost. Just when we had him, he would go and change the game. He claimed that he had to change bodies because when he was going to Canada, that they were going to get him for murder for having this body there. So anyway, the rubberized version of the Minnesota Iceman is down in Austin, Texas, at the Museum of Oddities. So you could see that. Send your viewers down there. So
yeah, interesting. All right.
But the thing too about why hoax, they get their 15 minutes of fame, and then some of these guys are brilliant, and they like playing games with the authorities, just like Jack the Ripper did. He would write, catch me if you can. He would write letters to Scotland Yard and give them clues and all this. So, part of this is the game of getting caught, of just pulling something over on somebody. But again, I have an issue with this. I take issue with it because it degrades cryptozoology. It degrades the paranormal, and we need all the credibility that we could get. I mean, we're working hard to have not only the scientific community, but the public view us as something that's valid and genuine and authentic. So,
that's the hope. But I feel like the phenomena itself will not allow that, if that makes any sense. It skews to the absurd.
Yeah,
it's sort of like you can't put it in a box, in a sense. It It like entices and repulses at the same time.
Good way to put it. Yeah. It's sort of outside the realm of the scientific. I think maybe some of the things that we see, there may be a scientific explanation. Maybe we'll find that out someday. But right now, a lot of this stuff is just out there.
Yeah.
And again, we can't define it. It doesn't have those parameters, this beginning and end. So we really don't know what it is, what these things are.
Yeah, no, all the stuff. That's the craziest part. We haven't had any really one sort of super breakthrough that will lead to anything else. It's kind of frustrating. But if you've been in this a long enough time, it's like this is a sea of crazy mysteries.
Yeah. I will say though, in 2025, there's been a couple of things that have happened that are, if you're watching the news, it's kind of an exciting time. Some of the probes on Mars believe that, there had been life there at one time. They're looking at canals and they're looking that there may be some signs that there was a civilization there, maybe millions and millions of years ago. So that's sort of interesting. Yeah. And then the other thing that happened in January, and this was up in the Antarctic, but there was a glacier that calved, it broke off and went into the sea. There was a bunch of oceanographers that saw that. They happened to be at the right place at the right time. So they took off. It took them an hour to get there, but they had robotic cameras that they sent under the sea. They wanted to know if there was any life there under this glacier that had been there for hundreds or maybe thousands of years. And they found
millions.
Yeah, maybe millions. They found squid, these gigantic squids, and they found other things, life forms there that lived there. And they didn't know if there was maybe some sort of plankton or some kind of life force, energy force that came underneath the glacier to feed these creatures and keep them alive, or if there was another mechanism that we don't know about. So this was exciting stuff. This was brand new. This was this year. So, so there's a lot of things that we don't know. And, when we talk about UFOs, a lot more people are saying that maybe they are going under the water and there's bases there as opposed to, intergalactic or interdimensional.
Yeah, maybe they just live here. So it's easier for them to, they're not actually coming here. They're from here. So it's like, okay, they're not. Yeah.
They get crab cakes every day.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's you kind of gave me your take on Bigfoot. What's your take on the UFO? We sort of were in jest there talking about the water thing. But do you have sort of a theory about what this is all about? And I guess more importantly, because you seem very bullish on the Tic Tac video. I'm more skeptical because I've been around forever and I'm just kind of like, all right, we have a saying on the show. You seem like a gentleman, Max, so I'll clean it up. But show me the effing aliens. Like I'm tired of waiting, right?
Yeah.
But what's your take? What's your take, I guess, on the phenomenon and what's happening now? Because you just kind of got into you wrote the Sheppton book in 2016. This UFO thing, UAP as we call it now, broke open about a year later. So. You're kind of like of this new generation of UFO people in a sense. So I guess what's your take on the phenomenon and what you've seen since you started looking into this and seeing what's going on?
First of all, that book, the Flying Saucer Esoteric, was my God. This, I wanted. It was like this ego-driven thing. I wanted to write 2 books in the same year. That was 2023. So I took a long time writing Coleridge and Hoodoo. So that came out in 2023, and then I had this idea that I wanted to immerse myself in science, flying saucers, UFOs. Not UAPs.
Right. We prefer flying saucers on this.
Yeah. Actually, so and it was sort of my version of microdosing for 100 days. So what I did was, this is crazy. and I was working on this book morning, noon, and night. My wife didn't see me a whole lot. I was going to finish this book in 100 days. And in case I burn out, in case I crashed, I would just pull out after 100 days. So I finished the book in 97 days. But It's sort of like an encyclopedia.
Dude, you're a warrior.
Yeah, well, I was that time. I won't do it again, but I wasn't really tripping. I wasn't microdosing, but it was something close to that. It was close to that. I was like adrenalized. I was like,
you kind of locked into your Sheppton. you
I
found
got-
Sheppton.
I really did, and I wouldn't recommend that for anybody else. But because you could really go and just get burnt out. But
Yeah.
I was able to do it and pull out, and I'm glad. But no, here's my my theory is I think that Bigfoot and UFOs have a lot of commonality. I think they have paranormal aspects. We look for flesh and blood with Bigfoot. We look for nuts and bolts with flying saucers. We're not finding anything, nothing conclusive. So
Right.
again, my theory is if it's not flesh and blood or nuts and bolts, what is it? I think that both these things could be interdimensional. They could be shape-shifting through another portal, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Nikola Tesla talked about if you want to know the secrets of the universe, look at the frequency and vibrations and the energies. Look at that. That's where the answers are. And I think the answers may be there. I don't know. Look at Stephen Greer. He comes up with, he takes Allen Hynek's Close Encounters of the first, second, and third kind, and he gives us of the fifth kind and says that maybe through meditation and prayer and increased vibration, we can actually go and connect with the grays and with these space creatures. So he's given us that thing, and that fits in with this vibrational, interdimensional thing. I think here's something that's interesting. I think all of us can maybe make our vibration higher. We could reach that point where maybe we could communicate with these maybe Bigfoot or UFOs that are of a higher vibration level. I think that's possible. The problem with that, though, with guys like me and you, is that we got the 9 to 5 gig going. We don't have time to just stay home and pray and meditate and work on that, and get into that state. It's possible, but you gotta devote your career to that. And
Interesting.
Yeah, so Saint Teresa of Avila was one who did that, and in Co-Regent Hoodoo, I talk about her, and she believed that through prayer and meditation, you could reach states of ecstasy and rapture and flight of the soul.
Right.
There's documentation that she was actually able to levitate, and they had to go and keep her down. The nuns had to go and force her down from levitating. And I'll give you another one, too, with Padre Pio, keeping along with the same, Catholicism thing. Padre Pio had this stigmata. He bled like Christ. And so the priest would go and wrap him up with gauze and watch. And after a week, they would unwrap the gauze to take a look. They were looking for signs of healing. They wanted to demonstrate that Padre Pio was just as human as me and you. Well, he was still bleeding. There was no scabs.
Oh, wow.
He suffered. But Padre Pio also had this thing, Tim, called bilocation. And it's been documented that he would be at the opera with his brothers and a fellow priest, and also he'd be like 100 miles away performing a mass or something else.
Yeah.
Two places at the same time, documented numerous times, bilocation.
Crazy.
Real crazy, yeah.
Yeah.
And even with him, the Vatican didn't know what to do with Padre Pio. They thought he was crazy. They thought that he was delusional, and thousands of people were coming to his church in Italy to be healed, to see a stigmata, to all this stuff. The Vatican didn't know what to do with this. They thought that here was this hoaxer that had deluded all these thousands of people into believing his delusions. They didn't know what to do with him. He was a magic man. He was working miracles and doing all this stuff, bilocation and stigmata, and they couldn't even accept that. So he had to put up with that too. So
yeah. So all right, but let's circle back. So as someone who just went on this wild trip of UFO absorption, what's your take on what do you think is going on right now with all this stuff? I'm interested in your perspective because you have a completely different look at this than I do.
Well, first of all, I'll tell you what. A lot of people are saying that the government knows something, and the government's not telling us anything. And I think that there's when you look at the dark money, when you look at those trillions of dollars that are going to the defense budget, not to the FBI or the CIA, but these other groups that we've never heard of, they're doing something there I did a presentation last year. The guy sitting next to me was from San Francisco. He worked for the government in remote viewing. And he wouldn't tell me a whole lot about what he did. But I know Jacques Vallée claimed that he was a really good remote viewer. But I believe that the government has all these entities that are working on remote viewing and time travel and mind control and
really
whatever. Yeah, you name it, I think, just to give us a military advantage. So I think that's going on. I think that's being funded.
It sounds crazy, but it also kind of makes sense because it's like, well, if we're not trying to figure out time travel, then the Chinese could be, or the Russians could be. So we better be trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Also.
Well, look at what the CIA did with,
right?
with MK Ultra and LSD.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that?
So interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So you're saying you think all these dark? So you're thinking they're mixed? They're kind of like fiddling around with alien technology. Is that kind of what you're speculating?
I think maybe, yeah. But here's the thing. I don't think we can get close to that. I don't think we could get close to the answer, and I don't think these representatives and senators can get close to that. They're not privy to that, and all of these congressional hearings that we had in, let's say, July of 2023 and November of 2024, where they had David Grush and Luis Elizondo, and Grush said that he knows where the bodies are, he knows where the vehicles are. Well, okay, that was in July of 2023. Well, where are they?
Show me the effing aliens, Max. Yeah, you're on the same team as me. Yeah. Where are these aliens?
Well, I took a little bit further. So when I was down in Florida, my wife and I are snowbirds. We're down in Florida. So I wrote letters to, what's his name? Marco Rubio, who was on the committee, Paulina Luna, Tim Murray, I believe,
not Bill Murray.
Chuck Schumer.
Tim Burch,
there were 7 of them that I wrote letters to, and I was encouraging them to encourage David Grush to show his cards. If he knows where the bodies are and the crafts are, shows the cards. So the only one that responded was Marco Rubio, and it was a nice 1.5-page letter. And then I was ready to send him another letter and maybe get something going here. And then he became Secretary of State. So Marco's out of the UFO business for now, and I need another contact. But I would encourage your viewers, your listeners, to go and write letters to their representatives demanding answers. We want to know what you know. And those congressional hearings are just a tease. It's a fake. It's just it's just song and dance, where they're talking the talk. They're not walking the talk. So I'm just claiming, write letters to your representatives and do what MUFON's doing behind the scenes, and just connect with them and lobby with them to go and let us know what they know. But the scary part, Tim, is that they might not know anything. This may be so clandestine, that it's many, many levels below and pay grades above, that they're not going to get that. I mean, I'm thinking that even the president may not know what's happening with those things. They have this thing called plausible deniability, like make it go away. So you send your hit team over there and you take them out, right? Well, I don't want to know about it. So, you just do it. So I got plausible deniability, it happened, but, I don't know anything about it. So I don't, but I just think that the government is just too convoluted, too complex. Too many things are classified.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's to me, in a way, it's like, seems like if they had figured this out by now, if they had figured it out, we would know by now, in a sense. You know what I mean? Like, they wouldn't be able to keep it a secret if it was like cut and dry that it's like aliens from another planet or whatever. It's too simple. Like, so I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. I personally don't think we'll ever really find out the answer in our lifetimes, but
that may be,
it's interesting because I'm cynical these days as you're talking about all the black money that goes into these things. Part of me's like, they probably want us looking for UFOs because they're probably building like cities underground so they can survive what's coming with the global catastrophe. That's where they're like, where's the money going? It's like there's giant cities underground that they're going to go to, and
Yeah, you're right.
Where the rest
Yeah,
of us
I was
shut
just
up.
at the Butler Paranormal Conference on last Saturday, and the one guy there, James Krug, was talking about the deep underground military bases, and he had a PowerPoint presentation. But man, they're all over the place.
James Krug, I got to get him on the show. Yeah,
Yeah, he's good. He's good. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's with MUFON. He's from a Pennsylvania guy. Yeah.
nice.
So anyway, but yeah, that was a great.
So yeah, interesting. All right, yeah. So what do you think? Do you think this is leading to some kind of revelation? Because part of me also, I sort of rail on this idea on the show, because to me, it's like I can't fathom how that would even be, how they could even sort of fit that into our society, where it's like one day they're like, okay, yeah, there's aliens, it's like, I don't know. I'm very skeptical that that'll ever really kind of happen in sort of like declarative.
Well, we had a couple of things. We had that Robinson report that claimed that the American public would not be able to handle the truth. So, right. Because it would upend society and organized religion and all this other stuff, so this is one theory that we don't have the right to know. The other thing is that I just think that it's hidden behind all these layers, and only certain people know. Oh, and, yeah. And for example, I'm sure that we have operations going on over there in Sudan and Nigeria and all over the place, but you're not going to hear about them, because nobody's going to talk about that, so I think that those are the dark things that are happening.
What do you mean operations? Like military operations?
I think so. Yeah, I think military operations in behalf of our government. Just doing that. Like, that your orders are this. Here's the funding. Make this happen. Make this go away.
That's how an empire is run, right?
Yeah. Another thing. Let me jump in with this too. I think it was Jacques Vallée that a while back was saying that this interplanetary theory just doesn't work anymore. To picture the Space Brothers flying their saucer from, Alpha Centuria to here, trillions of light years, just takes too much time and energy and propulsion. And by the time they get here, they're going to be like 1,000 years old. So that doesn't work. So Einstein and Rosen's bridge theory makes more sense, that theoretically, if you could go and have a wormhole through the space-time continuum, that would be a faster way to go from A to B. And I think that there may be these portholes somehow, and that may be how Bigfoot and UFOs are going back and forth. That's my theory. That's the only thing that makes sense. Everything else is just like a cartoon. So
yeah, it's you get deep into it, your mind starts to break. Yeah.
It's
like a lot of this makes you think of like simulation theory and shit, where it's like, maybe we are alone because the planet is just like this game or whatever that they're playing or whatever. It's really makes you think. So your trajectory, as we talked about here, going into the thing, Sheppton, then you're doing coal region hoodoo, then you're into flying saucer esoteric on what sounds like a fantastic. I like the altered states of ufology. I like the whole theme of this, of how you just dove in and wrote it in 97 days. Then Lost Tribes of Bigfoot, which I can think. So like the UFO book kind of broke you, and then you were like, all right, Bigfoot, I need you to bring me to salvation. So what is next for you? What you sound like someone who really develops a passion for what they're into at the time. Because like to jump from Sheppton to UFOs to Bigfoot, that's fantastic. I love that because so many people, you could have just done 14 books on mining disasters and I'd love them all, I'm sure. Yeah. But it's like you're like, well, wait a minute. Now you're doing UFOs. What, Bigfoot? So what do you have up your sleeve, Max? What's coming from you?
The book I'm working on now is called Paranormal Apocalypse. Is This How It Ends? And I take a look at fear, and I believe that man is controlled by fear, whether it's religious group, political groups, whatever. H.P. Lovecraft was one who said that the most powerful fear is, the most elemental fear is fear of the unknown. And a lot of people are just waiting for the day. And, I talk about doomsday cults like Jim Jones and, just a whole lot of things. So this is going to be pretty interesting. I think it opens up the doors. It's another realm of the paranormal. It's not cryptids. It's not flying saucers. It's not demonology, but it's something else. And it's pretty elemental. And it reflects on both you and I. I mean, our fears, so fear of the unknown.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like, I think I've heard before, it's like people like, when you worry that it's the end of the world, it's like, oh, they've been worrying it's the end of the world, like since the beginning of the world. Yeah. So it's like, I guess it's just a natural condition.
For some people, they could stay. Well, and some people, I think,
for society, I guess,
for society, I think some parts of our society are just like in a state of PTSD, where it's that hyper vigilance, where you're waiting for the next attack, the next pandemic.
Oh, welcome to this modern social media age.
Yeah. Bird flu. Come on. Something's going on there. So we're just waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Yeah.
And that's what PTSD is. It's a fear phobia. You're waiting for the next kaboom, the next blast and the next bad thing. So,
doom scrolling, as the kids call it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I talk about this, and then it does have a happy ending, but I think it's gonna be of interest, and love to be on your show again just to talk about that when that gets.
Yeah, when's that coming out?
Well, that'll be done this summer. I just I'm going through a computer glitch. I just got had to get a new computer because my 13-year-old iMac was just too slow, so I had to get a new one. And now everything's different, so I have to get a so I have to it's going to take me 3 days just to get this thing up and running. But the learning curve, but that's okay. So
yeah. Well, I got a few little stragglers here, but what's interesting to me too, I had that in the notes when you mentioned at the very beginning, celebrity blood voyeurism. And it's interesting to me, and I don't necessarily think this may align exactly with the definition you kind of put together with this, but the voyeurism part, the celebrity blood voyeurism in general, is just like that concept is so amplified since you kind of were first talking about it before you got into all this stuff, before you wrote the Sheppton book. So it's just very interesting. Like, we are a world of voyeurism now, and it is a joke online. Like, sometimes these people become internet famous, like for doing something cool or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think it's called like Pancake Duck or something. And it's like eventually you find out. So some random guy, he did something cool or heroic or whatever. And then within a couple of days, it's like you find out that he did something horrible too. So it's like, oh no. The wacky guy who had the Mountain Dew also was arrested for domestic violence. People get put through the ringer. It's like this voyeurism culture to an nth degree. You don't need to be a celebrity to be to fall. You just have to be the main character of the day online. Yeah.
With the that celebrity blood voyeurism, I really think it's almost like blood in circuses. I mean, we like to watch that. We like to see people come out of the trailer park, and rise, like Anna Nicole Smith. But then we also like to see her crash and burn. And, it's just, and, I think one of the best examples was Philip Seymour Hoffman. They called him the greatest actor of Generation X. These are people born between 65 and 78. And he was a heroin addict. And when he was out in Sundance, he was talking about his latest film, and he would introduce himself as Philip Seymour Hoffman junkie. And, he was just like, didn't even try to hide it, and those were his end days, but he was just such a skillful actor. I mean, I really liked his stuff. And, but too bad. It's like Steven Tyler of Aerosmith said, fame is like 1,000 chickens pecking you at the same time, pecking you to death. Yeah. And that's what fame is. I mean, you have celebrity stature. I mean, you have name recognition. You've been around for a while in the paranormal realm. So, you got a little
I don't want to fall victim to celebrity blood voyeurism.
But I mean, it's easy to get caught up in that fame.
Well, it's funny you say that. We laugh about it, but it's like, people also, you can become a celebrity nowadays, not for anything, just for having a presence.
Yeah.
That's the other weird part about celebrity. It's like, and again, that kind of goes to a lot of that stuff too. These people become famous. It's like, I see these stories like about TikTok stars that like die, and they're like, Jimmy Jones, beloved TikTok guy, died at like 28. And I'm like, who is this person? And so it's really, there's more celebrities than ever, it seems.
Yeah. And it was Paris Hilton.
Yes.
That was famous for being famous. That's what it was.
Right, exactly.
She kicked us off. Yeah. So
the Kardashians and all that too. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Now, one other thing that pinged me when you were talking way back at the beginning of the show, I don't want to get too into politics, but at the same time, when you said ketamine, I immediately thought of Elon Musk, and you seem to know a lot about this. So people say he does all this ketamine. Does he? Does it seem like he does based on your observation, what you know about any of this?
Well, I don't know if he does, but here's the thing. I think because of my background as an addiction specialist and knowing about these drugs, I think that really gives me an insight into the paranormal. Now, I don't know anything about Elon Musk, other than I don't really care for him. But all right. But with ketamine, it's a drug that there's no boundaries. Like, for example, here's me and here's the table. There's a spatial gap. But when you're on the ketamine, you merge as one. So you become part of everything. So it's just this universal thing. So that's sort of like the paranormal. And, and some of these drugs mimic that. Even ecstasy, Molly, with the increase of serotonin, you love everything. You're connected to everything. So, Johns Hopkins did an experiment on psilocybin. They were trying to unlock the key to spirituality, and they felt that psilocybin was the drug that when you're a very spiritual person, pray and meditate and everything, that you have these neural receptors, these neurotransmitters, the chemical stuff, and that psilocybin could mimic that. So again, they were trying to find out a pathway to the spiritual realm through chemicals. So John,
I got to ask you now, in your study of these drugs, did you do these drugs at all, or you just sort of like study the people who had?
Well, when I went through my drug using days, it was, I don't know if it was an experiment. A lot of us did. My drugs.
You were a rock journalist, so
yeah. My drugs of choice were the hallucinogens: LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, all that. I like that.
Okay.
Not the hard stuff, not cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine. Yeah, that's the bad stuff. That's the stuff that could get you hooked and really rip you up. But I always felt that. With LSD, I've done, plenty of acid trips. And, back in the day, they said that LSD destroys chromosomes. LSD is what else? All these crazy things.
Fuck you all up. Yeah.
Not true. All LSD does is, the good stuff, not the stuff coming over from China or India, but, not the designer drugs today, but the legitimate stuff from back in the day.
From the good old days.
Would titillate the part of your brain responsible for perception. That's what it was. So you would hear the colors and see the sound and all this stuff. This dysphoria, and I don't know if that was a means to creativity. I don't know about that. I just think some people are creative with or without the drug. But I never regretted, even though I was a drug and alcohol counselor. I never regretted my experience with the hallucinogens. Most of those were pretty pleasant. Yeah, I had maybe 2 bad trips, but other than that, it was a good experience. I wouldn't do it again. I think I wouldn't want to rewire my brain. I think my cognition is pretty good right now, so I don't.
Don't upset the apple cart, dude.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right.
So that's that. But again, then this isn't a pro-drug thing, because I don't advocate drugs now, because I don't know what they are. I do have a friend.
Things have changed over the years.
Have a friend that went down to Kentucky for a weekend with doing ayahuasca.
Oh, Jesus.
And that was one that was a nightmare. You crawl through the pit before you feel that.
Yeah, you get really sick. Yeah, you get really sick. Yeah.
So anyway, but she went down to Kentucky for that one. So anyway.
Wow. That's something that I would do then.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So,
well, Tim,
right.
I'm going to
so
be
you got the new book coming out. But yeah,
yeah.
let's do. See, I can tell you've done a lot of podcasts because you're tighter on this than I am. Yeah, man, I love it. All right. So we've established that the book's coming out. Possibly you're finishing it this summer, so hopefully later this year or something like that.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, and the website is maximfurek.com, MAXIMFU. Oh no, I don't mean it, folks. FUREK.com. So maximfurek.com is the website, and you got you. I said this to you before we started the show. You are prolific, man. You are. I see you at all these. I don't actually see. I see you are appearing at all these different events. I'm like, holy shit! That's like the sixth thing I've seen Max on, like in the last 2 months. So, what do you have going on? I'm sure you've got a lot of stuff cooking here as the spring and summer is about to unfold.
Yeah, we're going to be down in Wyers Cay, Virginia, with Daniel Benoit's Bigfoot Expo. That's going to be June 20th and 21st. And then we're going to be at Gwen Purcell's Elysburg event. That's in, I believe, August. And, and then I'm trying to stay off the road because I want to go and finish this book. So as soon as I get the glitches out of my computer, the learning curve with the new computer, then I'll be working on that. And but I think, I'm looking forward to discussing the book on your program. And I think it's
we'll get you
I think it's going to be an interesting topic for a lot of people. So I blend the paranormal with the apocalyptic. So
yeah.
Sort of a nice little.
I'm looking forward to it. It sounds good. Sounds right up my alley. Well, Max, I can't thank you enough, man. This has been an absolute blast. I've had a lot of fun chatting with you. I'm fascinated by your trajectory and your evolution in all this. It's been really interesting to talk to you about that and learn more about it and your take on all these interesting topics. So thank you so much. And we'll talk to you again when the new book comes out for sure, because I really enjoyed this. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I really appreciate having me on as your guest. I had a really great time, and I hope your listeners, I hope they enjoyed it as well. I mean, I guess that's the bottom line, that this was informative and entertaining and interesting. So
absolutely, yeah.